All right, we should be recording.
Thank you. So the recording has begun. Welcome all to our January meeting. The first item up for a vote would be the meeting minutes from our previous meeting. Should be December. Which are in your board packet, December 17th. Should be looking for a motion to approve.
So moved, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Do we have a second? Thank you, Allison Lowell. Any corrections? Comments? All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? No nays. Do we have any that wish to abstain from the vote, recuse themselves? All right, motion carries. Excellent. So the next thing on the agenda is our award decisions for the Producer Association and Service Provider Grant. This will be a vote, so I'm going to be looking for a motion, and I'm going to read those off that have accepted, which is a result of our motion at the last meeting. So our staff is engaged and come up with the following list. So we have the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, which is planning for adoption and resilience, business development services through the Farm and Forest Viability Program for $75,000. Clemens Family Farm Incorporated, which is piloting the African Diaspora Foodways Institute of Vermont, $25,000. Vermont Woodlands Association, building a resilient future for Vermont's working woodlands, merging Vermont LEAP with VWA to secure logger education, $39,160. Northeast Forest LLC, doing business as a Vermont Forest Business School, Vermont Forest Business School training and business coaching program for a total of $40,000. The Parish Hill Creamery, Science and Craft of Artisan Cheese Conference for $25,000. Vermont Community Loan Fund, Vermont Community Loan Fund Sprout Loan Program for $72,000. Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund for the Forest Products Development Program for $55,000. Connecticut River Watershed Farmers Alliance, a farmer-led ag plastic recycling pilot for the Connecticut River Watershed, $20,000. Paul Frank and Collins for human resources and employment law skills for working lands businesses for a total of $18,150. The grand total of these awards is $369,310. So I would be looking for a motion to approve that slate. Thank you, Allison Lowell. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Elizabeth.
Thank you,
again.
Elizabeth. Appreciate it. Is there any comments? Hearing any? All those approve, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. Abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Thank you, Will. Ellen?
Ellen abstains because I don't vote anyways.
Excellent. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you all. All right. So, Ellen, do you want to lead off on an update on the Working Lands Coalition, and I'll tag team at the end. On
And
our
I want to add one note. And I think this is just because this is a different process. I think moving forward, I will just include the full list in the board packet when we're doing this kind of like finalized vote. So that's a good note. Instead of just sending it to you, Allison, I think it makes sense to share it with everybody. And Will, Ellen, and Liz, because you weren't a part of that conversation, I will make sure you get the list so that you can take it in a little bit more of a leisurely, in-depth fashion.
Thank you.
Okay. So thanks for the time. So for those of you who may be newer to the board, I thought it would be helpful. Elizabeth asked me to provide a little history and context for the Working Lands Coalition. and how it relates to this board, how it and the efforts that the coalition will be undertaking to try to support additional funding for the board. So when Vermont Council on Rural Development had their 2-year process of identifying working lands as a core part of Vermont's economy, that then led to the bill that was passed in 2012. I believe it was Act 142, which established the board, the Working Lands Enterprise Board. At that same time, it was felt by Vermont Council of Rural Development, or that goes by the acronym VCRD, that it would be helpful to have this group of Vermonters, many of whom are part of organizations that are actively engaged in promoting working lands businesses, and who helped with supporting the passage of the Act 142, that there would be a value in having an ongoing coalition of organizations and a group of partners, people that have signed a pledge saying that they really support working lands businesses in Vermont, for instance, and keeping our ag and forests in working order. To have this coalition that could be an independent group apart from any state agency or department that on its own would support and advocate for consistent and increasing funding for the Working Lands Enterprise Fund, so that the fund could successfully provide grants to forest and ag and food and businesses and technical assistance provider organizations in the state through its grant making process. So over the years, that group has pooled resources, meaning putting in a little bit of money each organization to hire Amy Schollenberger from Action Circles to serve as a registered lobbyist on the coalition's behalf during the legislative session, and to give the coalition members guidance on how to properly advocate for support of funding for working lands. Over the years, that has looked like sometimes just when the governor's recommended budget was at a strong level for the fund, then it was really about maintaining that and trying to ensure that the governor's recommend was in fact approved by the legislature. On years where the governor's recommend was lower than what the coalition had set as its goal for the fund, then we advocated for increasing funding with contacts that we have in various legislative committees. So in 2 years, not this current session, but last session, the coalition for the first time did not have an active presence in the legislature. The group was kind of, the VCRD was going through a leadership transition. There just wasn't enough energy and focus to pull the group together. And so in essence, the coalition took the year off. And it was noticeable that we weren't in the building advocating for the Working Lands Enterprise Fund and its funding. Legislators noticed it. My understanding is various agencies and departments noticed it, and we all noticed it, members of the coalition. So this past fall, VCRD has a new leader the executive director is now Denise Smith from St. Albans area in Franklin County. And she and Jessica Savage, who also works for VCRD, have been holding a series of meetings with coalition members. And in essence, we've rebuilt the coalition and are pooling our resources once again to hire Action Circles to advocate for at least $3 million to support the base of the Working Lands Enterprise Fund allocation of $1 million and advocate for $4 million in one-time funding for the fund. So that is what the coalition will be working on. And we'll see on the 28th, the governor will be giving his state of the budget, sort of his budget speech, and we'll see at that point how much is in the governor's recommended budget. And so at that point, the coalition will decide, are we in a hold the line and try to push through what is in the governor's recommend, or are we going to be advocating for a higher allocation? So the group meets periodically. We'll be hiring we have in fact hired Action Circles to represent us again in the building, and they provide a lot of overall support indicating who we should be talking to, all in the service to try to get more funding available to this board to do its annual grant making allocation.
Thank you, Ellen. That's fantastic overview. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, I should say, Allison, that some of the members of the coalition are the Vermont Land Trust, CAE, Intervale Center, NOFA Vermont, Vermont Farm Bureau, Vermont Woodlands Association. I'm forgetting all the names, but there's probably at least a dozen, maybe a bit more organizations that are part of the coalition and advocating together.
Thank you, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Alan, I haven't been around long enough to know what the sort of State House presence or lobbyists for the Working Lands Coalition did previously. So my question is, beyond advocating for funding for the Working Lands enterprise, will the person also get involved in policy measures related to working lands and be a voice there? You know, I'm thinking if legislation is introduced that would, you know, I'm coming from the forest products sector, so if legislation is introduced that could impact either the use value appraisal program or how we do planning for vegetation management and timber sales on state lands that could influence working lands writ large, would this person lend their voice to those discussions as well?
No, they will not. We had a discussion this fall about whether the coalition had an appetite for advocating for any other kinds of policies that might arise during the session in addition to the Working Lands Enterprise Fund funding. And because we're in a rebuilding phase and because we really want to stay very focused on WLEB funding, we will not be getting involved in any other policy work. Now, that doesn't mean that individual members of the coalition aren't available to do so, but they would be doing so as their own organization and not representing the Working Lands Coalition. And I should also say Will is here, so VCLF has been part of that coalition too. Sorry, Will. So yeah, Oliver, you know, it's we're just realizing how many coalitions are out there, and you know, and all the different potential things that could arise. It doesn't mean that the coalition couldn't decide to do something like that in the future, but for now, it really is just staying narrowly focused on the Working Lands Enterprise Fund.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I'm going to piggyback off this topic and what Ellen has provided as far as the coalition. Pretty pleased to hear that it's back up, and thank you to those of you that have worked to get the coalition back. It's really important, probably more so now when we have new chairs of our committees of jurisdiction, and then also a large amount of new members. And in saying that, you know, I really, as somebody who served in the legislature and understanding how nuanced it can be, whether a legislator understands that you're representing your organization, the Working Lands Board, or you as an individual. And I think it's just really important that if we as board members decide to go over and testify or, you know, provide any testimony on behalf of the coalition, as a board member, you know, you can do it. We just think that it's best to clarify who you're representing. And since the board itself does not grant, you know, full power of each individual to represent the full board, when you're given testimony, it's very important to state that you're not acting on behalf of the board. You can state that you are a board member. You can state that your organization that you do work for and represent, and feel free to, interact with the coalition, but just caution you to make sure that it's very clear that you're not representing the Working Lands Board when you're doing so. So it's an exciting time to have it back up, but noting that we have a lot of new members and new chairs, I think you have to be very clear when you're on the witness stand. So if you have questions, you've been asked to go over, you need some clarity, you want to talk before you're on the witness stand, feel free to give a call or send a email letting us know that you're heading over, and we'd be happy to have a chat if there's any clarification that's needed. And I'm sure Ellen or Will, those experts that have done it for years, would be happy to chat as well. So feel free to reach out to us. We're pretty excited to have the new session. I think too, mentioning that, we've lost our appropriations contacts. We've got new appropriation contacts in the House, which prior, we always had Tristan, who I served with in the legislature, and then Diane Lamfair as our chair the last few years, who are both really familiar with Working Lands. So we definitely have some new relationships to establish. I know we'll be able to do it because we're a strong group and network well in the building. But please let us know if you need any support or have questions. Does anybody have any questions on that topic before we move on? Need any clarity?
I would just say that if anyone is interested in their organization becoming a member of the coalition, to please reach out to me. And or if you as a board member, even if your organization is not a member of a formal member of the coalition, but you just want to be kept abreast of when there might be a need to make a phone call or something like that, also just reach out and I'll make sure that you're on the list with Denise Smith at VCRD, so we can let you know. A lot of times, for instance, well, the House Appropriations Committee in early February always has a budget hearing, and what we always try to do is to get a few Working Lands Enterprise grantees to make a 2-minute presentation of supporting the allocation of funding for the Working Lands Enterprise Fund. And so during those kinds of times, it can be really helpful to have extra people in the room, or just, sending quick notes to various legislators indicating like, yeah, my organization supports this. So.
Thank you. We are going to turn over our agenda to Elizabeth for strengthening our decision-making process.
All right. So I think, many of us are aware that we worked last year quite a bit, really focused on strengthening the review process. And that's when we shifted into meeting as, sort of sector focused cohorts instead of doing the one big review meeting. We created, hold on one second. I'm sorry. I need 1 second. Mom? Mom?
I think we need transfer.
Dad?
Should be quick. Elizabeth's dealing with a sick child. Oliver, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Do you want to move on to our updates?
I would love to. I just need to sort of rattle a few things off. As the new year picks up, trying to think a couple of things of note in the Department of Forest Parks and Ref, and on behalf of Agency of Natural Resource, we We just received all the proposals for our urban and community forestry annual grant rounds. Those those were advertised late last year. We had probably triple the amount of money requested. These are both tree planting and tree maintenance grants in urban communities in Vermont. So it's great to see that level of interest. Our overall funding envelope is in like the $300,000 to $400,000 range, and we had at least triple that in terms of applications. So that's a big demand, but those grants will be awarded in the near future. Just trying to think what else is worthwhile for this group. We're of course, like everybody else, watching the legislative session with interest. There are some draft bills we've heard about that are proposing changes to the use value appraisal program, one of which would essentially do two things. It would one of them is well aligned with one of Governor Scott's priorities, which says it would provide an exemption for people who take land out of use value appraisal for the purposes of constructing affordable housing. And so I think there's, to meet the housing goals that the governor has put forth, there's some interesting and perhaps attractive aspects of that bill. However, the devil is always in the details, and the draft bill that we've seen does have some language that we'll want to discuss and make sure that it's a process that is administratively possible, not going to have some unintended impacts. A second bill that we believe that will come out of the House Committee on Agriculture and Forestry, would create some sort of mechanism to make the use value appraisal program lands have an option to make them permanently conserved. And that's an interesting one. I think that's coming out of the Act 59 language of lands for lands to qualify to meet our 30% of Vermont conserved by 2030 target in Act 59, they must benefit from some permanent form of conservation. And there's of course thousands of acres that have been in working lands hands and for multiple generations, and probably meet most of the definition of permanently conserved, the de facto definition, but don't meet the legal definition. And there's landowners that don't have the financial means to engage in the existing formal conservation easement project, which has heavy legal fees associated with it. So this bill purportedly would introduce some mechanism to allow UVA program participants to have lands permanently conserved. That's an interesting one, because on the face of it, it seems that somewhat in conflict with clear aspects of the use value appraisal program in the sense that lands can come in and come out of UVA based on landowner behavior, landowner desires, new, existing, previous landowners. So on its face, that there seems to be some interesting challenges with making UVA permanent. So again, we'll be watching that space and see what comes out of there. Allison, I see that Elizabeth is back, so I might stop there and let us get back to our regularly scheduled programming, but happy to answer any questions about those two updates.
Thank you, Oliver. Don't see any hands, so I think you're off the hook. Elizabeth, we good? You want to head back to conversation, and then we'll do the other two updates when you're done.
Yeah, I think it's very flexible if we continue with the updates or flip back. And Oliver, you also can definitely complete your update if you had other things you wanted to share.
I'm fine for now. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm back, and now I can focus a little bit more. So I'm just going to restart. Last year, I think many of you are aware, but I do want to sort of offer a summary for new board members. We piloted some changes to our review process, and we were really focused as a program team and thinking about ways to improve that process. And of course, we're interested in continuing to improve it. But some of the changes that were made, that were piloted last year and are continuing this year, was moving from that large review conversation where we had 40 plus reviewers trying to discuss all of the applications in one large meeting. We've now shifted to the sector review meetings. We now, instead of everybody completing a financial review, we learned, and we're definitely interested in finding a solution to the fact that some reviewers did not feel competent in offering a financial review and did not feel comfortable doing that financial review. So that was another major shift that was made, that we now have designated financial reviewers who in the survey say, yes, we feel capable of doing the financial reviews. And so I'm bringing up those changes, which have been largely, in the survey where we asked for feedback post review, have been largely very popular and appreciated. But we're now this year shifting our focus to thinking more about the board's decision meeting, and are there, and really, like, we're approaching this with a very open-minded curiosity about ways to strengthen the decision meeting. So that when I say decision meeting, I mean the board's decision meeting. So after the review process, which many board members participate in, we then, the final decisions are made in a board meeting, which we call a decisions meeting. That final slate of applications are identified. And with the coordinating committee, we've already discussed some changes that I will share now to get to get our juices flowing. But really, we just want to take a moment for everybody, and maybe after I share some of the initial proposals, we could even take like 3 minutes of silence where people can like jot down some ideas and really reflect. I know that for myself, at least, I need to sit with an idea and think about it, go on a walk, think about it some more to have ideas pop up. So I want to also offer that this is the beginning of a conversation. Please feel free to email me. Please feel free to ask for a conversation. It doesn't have to be contained to this one slot in the meeting. I really want to look at this as a ongoing conversation this year. And I think it's also possible that after, we just completed the producer association and service provider decision process, and we're heading into the business enhancement decisions process. And after that process, it's very possible that, people will have new ideas. And so I just want to, I welcome this feedback, and I'd love, and I'd love for as much as possible, really to hear from each of you on, whether it be today or, email or one-on-one conversation about things that, and I think we can also highlight things that are working really well that you are excited about, but with the focus on areas of improvement. So a few of the the changes that we discussed with the coordinating committee are, one, having a preempted or basically a fixed introduction to each grant. So instead of having each grant introduction be very much designed by the person introducing sort of organically, we would ask that each person introducing the grant would introduce, it's like I was framing it as a to-buy statement. So and outline the key achievements by outlining the key activities. And and then highlighting any concerns that came up in the review conversation or any real strengths. And so every introduction would follow that pattern, and it would kind of even out the slate of, or like the quality, or like the in-depth, the depth of the different introductions to the grants in the meeting. And I think along with that, we also would like to sort of pre-assign reviewers' introductions so that they know which reviews they'll be expected to introduce. So nobody is, because I think in the past I've said, all right, we have 3 reviewers, Will, John, and Ellen, like who would like to introduce the grant? The thought is now I would send out a list, and you would see exactly, I would send you a list of the grants that I'm hoping you would be willing to introduce, so that you can go back and look at your notes and, be prepared to sort of offer the to-buy introduction. So actually, maybe I will pause and just see if anybody has comments on that or questions. And again, like I'm offering some changes, and then we're going to open it up for further conversations. But are there any questions, or does that like sit well with people generally? Or I guess more, it's like, does that raise any concerns or red flags for anyone? Thumbs up if it sounds pretty good. See 1, 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up. Okay. Thumbs up. All right.
Elizabeth, Elizabeth, I would just suggest just pausing and just let people think and take it in a little bit, and let's just, some folks need to cogitate a little bit longer, so let's just have a moment.
Okay, take a moment.
Any feedback, comments, suggestions?
Allison.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one observation from some other sessions where we've discussed the proposals. The discussions do seem to be very productive, as long as it's always guaranteed that there's somebody with confidence in financial docs who's there to bridge the gaps. I mean, and I'm assuming that those discussion groups will still be set up the same way.
Yeah, the review process isn't changing. This is very much just focused on the decisions meeting where the board is making decisions.
Okay.
Tyler.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I probably need to sit with a little bit more. So I don't have like a really specific suggestion now. It's more just a reflection. I'm thinking about when we come together as a whole board, there's a lot of us, time is limited, and kind of modern iteration where we have a lot more really quality applications than we do have funding. We're really like looking to pare the list down. I'm just wondering if there's some more formal pieces we can bring into that process to really sharpen our focus, from the beginning. I always feel like we're a little rushed at the end and sort of moving really quickly. Something just about kind of paring us down. Like having the sort of, maybe it's like the maybes, sort of reordering or ranking them. I need more time, but I just want to put a pin in this particular
Well,
topic.
let me actually, no, I think that this is really helpful, Tyler. And the next consideration that was discussed with the coordinating committee was, I think, actually getting to this. The suggestion was that in the review meetings this time around, because in the past, we've always asked reviewers to limit the maybes, right, that are coming out of the review meeting. And a suggestion for this next, so for the business enhancement review is actually to limit the yeses. So like the yeses would be something that the reviewers feel very strongly needs to be funded, like top of the population, like of applications being looked at, like this would be disappointing and this would really impact this, like this cohort, this sector, if this wasn't funded, and actually use the maybes a little bit more generously. And so that the board would then be able to focus more on the maybes, knowing that the yeses are very strong recommendations from reviewers who have done like this deep dive conversation of all the applications in that sector. And that the maybes would actually be where the board focuses. And the idea would also be that, because my feeling is that like we send out this review spreadsheet, it has up to 80, summaries of 80 applications. Like that's a lot to ask board members to review prior to the meeting. But if we know that the conversation is going to focus on the maybes, like I think we will still introduce the yeses. I think people could then really take some time. Like let's say there's 12 maybes, to go ahead and read through those applications and think about them more, and think about like how they fit in with the yeses, right? Because I think it takes some time to think about like, to look at like, and I always try to lay out like the sector breakdown of the yeses, and sometimes also the maybes. And I can, share that in the board packet ahead of time, but like sit with it and see, like what would complete the puzzle of the yeses, like help us identify the gaps, or like, obviously observations that weren't made by the reviewers. Is that bringing like, I'm just like,
Yeah.
how does that sound like it might address some of that?
Yeah, I like those thoughts a lot, actually. I know as a board member, I'm very comfortable with like the yeses, like that feels quite rigorous when those come. I don't necessarily feel like I need a lot of discussion about those. So I like that idea of having a very clear list of yeses, almost that like other board members would like need to name to like pull off of being yes to talk about. Could be interesting. I think we probably still need to limit the maybes in some way, because we could find ourselves in the same situation if we had 2 to 3 times the number of maybes as what could be converted to yeses. But yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. And I wonder if a little bit of pre-analysis, I'm also just thinking about like just general board members' limited capacity to do a tremendously deep dive on all of the applications. So the yeses are sort of coming from the sectors. They're not necessarily integrated with the whole not necessarily competing across sector at that review stage. So a little more analysis on like what those missing pieces or what could fill the gap could be interesting to have as a board member ahead of the meeting, to help just kind of get us further along when we start. So maybe more thinking to do here, and I'm happy to participate in some way, but feels like it's really good now. I think it could be a bit better.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I just want to say like that's why we're having this conversation. So I feel like it can get better. And I feel like it's, it's exciting, it's always exciting to improve processes that are they're working, but like, how can we make them better? And that's really what this, the beginning of this conversation is about. And it's also about like, how do we use all of your time, like in the best possible way and your expertise? I think definitely participation in the, and many board members participate in the review meetings, and offer their expertise in that way. And that feels like incredibly valuable. But I think, yeah, this opportunity to think together about the decision meeting. And I think the two sort of brackets the two buckets that I just introduced, like the introduction of grants being more robust. I think a part of what that was trying to address also is allowing board members to feel more confident that they understand the project well enough to comment, even if they haven't read the full application. Because, yeah, I mean, I think I'm always looking for ways also to like increase participation and make sure that all board members feel like they have participated, meaningfully in like making the decisions. Yeah, and then I think the other bucket is, Tyler, what we just said about focusing more on like the yeses being like very strong yeses. And I agree that we would have to still limit the maybes. Otherwise we would just have yeah, a huge number of maybes. But yeah, now I think maybe we can pause again. And if there's a coordinating, if I've forgotten anything that we discussed in the coordinating committee meeting, yeah, please feel free to complete those thoughts. But I think those are the two things that we as a programs team have discussed and then discussed with the coordinating committee. But if there's, and I think Tyler, just as I think it's also great just to raise a question, like to say this, this doesn't like work quite right. I haven't, cracked the nut on like being able to propose a solution. But I think it's okay to just raise questions and have us sit with those questions as well. Donna.
Yeah, I have just a kind of a short technical question. I typically, I'm reviewing Maple sector grants, and I've done all my reviews, and I usually will go read the other ones that I wasn't assigned just so I'm familiar. And for some reason now I can't see anything in web grants except the 6 that were assigned to me. And it was really helpful when I could read all of them.
Oh, interesting. I don't know that was unusual actually that you were able to see all of them, but it would be that we export the reviews in the spreadsheet and that gets sent out prior to the meeting. So everyone would be able to read those beforehand.
Great. But it sounds like Donna was able to read them in web grants.
Yeah. Maybe Lily, and we can connect with Lily on that and see kind of what the functionality is and if we can get that back. But otherwise, we would definitely have it in the spreadsheet.
I wonder if it was a role permission. That sounds like maybe too much of a blanket role permission of like what you're allowed to do in web grants. It's usually just internal staff. I wonder if there was like a setting that got. Yeah.
But that felt helpful to you, Donna? Like you liked being able to like see all of the Maple applications in web grants.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
only because like sometimes you read them and you're like, you either think they're all great or they're all bad. And you're like, wow, I wonder if I just by chance got assigned like a set of them that, were all at the top or all at the bottom. So sometimes it's helpful to just do a quick perusal of the others to say, oh, okay, yeah, that's what's happening.
And you weren't doing that though with the spreadsheet. I just want to make sure
No,
you were doing that in web
I
grants.
could
Okay.
see them in web grants. I couldn't review them, but I could go in and read the
Read them.
application.
I think Liz.
Yeah, I don't know that it's realistic that all of us would have time to do that, but I think I would find it really helpful if I did have time to be able to do that kind of thing. Definitely agree that sometimes seeing that bigger picture is really helpful. And you're always only reviewing within your own reviews, so scores can get impacted by that. And then just really quickly wanted to say that if there's a way to like really, really, really keep us on track time-wise, which I know is really hard, so that at the end you're not rushing through applications. Definitely agree with Tyler that that would be helpful.
And do you have any like suggestions of how, like what that might look like or
No, and I will say that it's great to have these conversations. It's great to try to make this process better. I agree that there's room for improvement. And like, this is a human imperfect process, and it's probably not ever going to be like this machine that spits out perfect answers from the end. So to always try to do better and to give ourselves a little bit of grace. Like I will say with my team, we've spent a lot of time trying to get as effective as possible with our own grant review meetings and doing a ton of work before the decision making with our board to make that board meeting as efficient as humanly possible. And still, it's like really hard. And that's like usually a smaller number of applications, a smaller number of board members. So great to try to make it better, and it's still going to be hard. But I think cutting people off, like if we can't make the decision within a certain number of minutes, saying like we have to stop talking about this now and we'll save 10 minutes at the end for anything that's unresolved. But like if you let one thing go take up 10 more minutes than it should, that just means other people are not getting their fair review.
Ellen?
Yeah, I concur with everything everybody's been saying. The one thing that I'm wondering about, it's more of a practice that I'm wondering if how folks feel about doing. And I'm not sure exactly the right timing, if it's like partway through or at the end or at the beginning. But historically, one of the things that this board has always tried to make sure we were doing is providing grants to businesses that maybe haven't been or don't normally get grants, right? Like I know we have this timeline of like you have to wait 3 years, but there's still a bunch of businesses that are on the 3-year track and that we see them every 3 years. And so there's an awful lot of businesses out there that are not as skilled grant writers. They don't know to hire Rose Wilson to write their grant for them. And so it can be really hard for farms and forest products businesses, food businesses that aren't used to writing grants to like fully compete. And I know that we keep an eye out for that, but I just want to raise that as like really important for us to be intentional about. And the other part is for us to maybe get up in elevation and take a look at the entire potential slate and say, which of these proposals, maybe it's the ones that are in the maybe bubble, are a little bit riskier, but if if it works, like it could actually like really be an amazing thing that happens, right? Because with grant dollars, it is the type of money along the capital continuum where you can afford to be sort of the riskiest, so to speak, in that like they're the types of projects that would be really hard to get a bank loan for. But that doesn't mean it's not a really solid project that could really move the needle on a lot of things that this board is trying to incentivize and move forward on. It's just that it might be outside of sort of the more traditional realm of the type of projects that are like tried and true. So I'm wondering about how we could just sort of, sort of flag that or identify them, and just so that we have awareness about them, that we don't overlook them accidentally. And then also really paying attention to what counties they're in, so that we have a strong mix of county representation and that we have a strong mix of folks that haven't ever received a working lands grant before.
And I think as far as the my ideal would be that, that type of like conversation, like, hey, this is risky. It has the ability to have like, sort of supply chain level impacts, or like impact like a number of businesses, or, move the needle in some way, like during the reviewer conversation. And then my hope would be also that whoever is presenting that that application, includes that in the introduction, so that it's very clear for all of the board members that that was, discussed and is like a part of the conversation. So it's like the 2 by strengths, concerns. And I would say, if it's a unique project that is poised to really move the needle somewhere, that would be a strength. That reviewer should really call out in the introduction. I think that's the best way. That's I think the way that is popping out to me. And I think certainly like in the past, we've added a column in the spreadsheet to list working lands awards, like years that businesses have received. And I think we can go, that's like pretty easy for us to do, and we can go back to doing that if that felt helpful. And we can also do like a tally of counties. I think that would be like, if those feel like important, because, I think there is this question for me around, because sometimes we talk about stage of business, right? Like we want a distribution of stage of business, or we want a distribution geographically, or we want like not funded. So in some ways it would be helpful to know, like, what are the most important things that we actually want to look at when we're making those final decisions. And that is like, for me, it remains a question in my mind of like, so I think it would be actually really helpful to hear from you all, like, which of the sort of sub criteria feel really important for us to look at. I think I just gave some examples of geographic location, stage of business. When I say stage of business, I mean like growth stage, beginning stage. I think, what are some of the others that we end up, certainly like diversity across sectors, but I think we look at that, like, that's like one that we look at pretty consistently. All right, I would love to hear people's feedback on that though. But Sarah and then Donna first.
Yes, I agree with much of what's been said, including Ellen's comments. And sometimes it's for some of these riskier or innovative businesses that are often undercapitalized, it's receiving a working lands enterprise grant that leverages funding such as a loan, including VEDA loans. And so I've like witnessed that in a number of different situations where it really is what the grant is what really made it possible for whatever the project was to ultimately happen. And I also like the idea of looking at geographic distribution and at, and definitely giving, like trying to give as much credibility as we can to grants that have not been professionally prepared. So, thank you.
Donna and then Liz.
Yeah, that it's interesting when you talk about stage of business. I certainly look at that, but the applicant will tell you the stage that they think they're in. But I actually find their years in business to be a little more useful. Like sometimes I'm looking for, somebody who just started sugaring 5 years ago versus the ones that have, been doing it for 40 or 50 years. I think we should try for a distribution of, and like I said, they will tell you if they think they're a new business, but sometimes just looking at the years in business is really helpful to me.
Yeah, I love that, Donna, because I definitely have read applications where they're like growth stage, like they're putting themselves as an older business, but they're actually like, they've only been in it for 1 or 2 years. All right, Liz and then Bob and then Allison. Liz.
Thanks. Oh my gosh, am I gonna forget? Oh, just talking about support with applications, I just wanted to note that our team has been working really closely with the Working Lands team to try to support people with a little bit of grant writing help at the right time. Always looking for feedback on how to do that better, or if you know of a business that could use some help who's not going to be able to or doesn't make sense to hire a grant writer for a full application. I personally feel strongly that like the best thing is not hiring grant writers to write your entire application. Maybe that benefits an individual and that's a good idea, but in terms of like what this grant was set up to do, like we're not trying to prioritize professionally written grants, but we're also trying to provide some professional help at the right time to move people along this. So any ideas folks have around how to do that better, or businesses that you think could use that support, just you can always reach out to me or Callie or obviously Claire and Elizabeth. And I'm sorry, but I have to leave early to get over to the State House, so I'm gonna hang up in the next 90 seconds. But good to see everyone.
Thank you, Liz. Allison and then Bob. Allison and then Bob.
Yeah, I think that Donna made a really good point. I was just reading a grant application where they described the stage that they were in, and it had me scratching my head. So maybe also when the reviews come up, and perhaps in those discussions, we should be highlighting that if we really believe that there's a discrepancy.
Bob.
Yeah, I was just kind of tagging on to something that Ellen was getting at is I think, at least personally, I when I'm reviewing, I prioritize non-collateralized projects because, like buying a piece of equipment, there's multiple options to finance. And the innovative projects that don't create any collateral but do increase the business are the ones that I think are important. And also I would also like to reiterate the importance of us having full geographic support throughout the state for the grants, and not just concentrated in Chittenden County. it's just, I think that's very important for our funding sources. And that's all.
And Bob, I just have a question of like how how do you think that would be best like called out or
how is that best standardized among all the reviewers?
Yeah.
That's a hard one. I think it all comes down to the results of the symposiums on what our focus for the year is, and come up with some metrics on that. I guess I don't have a full answer for that. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can think about it, or if anybody else has, thoughts that build off of that. Because that's not one that's ever come up before, so that's like piquing my interest. Like we've never even like that's never come up in a board meet, or like it's not come up in the way that we think about geographic location or previous award. So it's really interesting. Would it be just like flagging grants that are like primarily equipment, like budget lines, or?
Well, I think we've done it in the past. It's we've had the conversations in the past of the grant's really just a cost of doing business.
Yeah.
And there are times when I've read grants where it's deferred maintenance, living off depreciation, and then they're in a crisis point that they need to replace something. I know it sounds harsh, but it's reality that I don't think that's a good use for grant funds.
Well, and this is the first year that cost of doing business grants have been ineligible. Claire, do you actually want to copy paste the language of that in the chat just for folks that maybe want to refresh?
Sure. This year I think it will be interesting to see next month at our business enhancement meeting, because I think we did provide much clearer eligibility, both around cost of doing business, also kind of all those like specific sectors that maybe aren't really in line with our priorities, like indoor growing type things. And I think just to Liz's point around how VHCB was providing light touch application support. And I think as staff, I was much more like if someone called me and had a project that was eligible but sounded less like, maybe this isn't really the best fit for grant funding, we were trying to be a lot more upfront of like, this is a really competitive grant, and unless your project's kind of ready to go and you've really thought it through, maybe you shouldn't apply, and we would connect them then with the HCB to talk through further. So we're hoping that kind of helps narrow, well, we still got 90 applications, but maybe narrow the pool a little bit in that way.
And with any new eligibility, and then I just want to see Alex and then Allison and then Donna, or wait, maybe it's Donna, Allison, and then Alex. I'm just realizing it shows the order of the hands. With any new eligibility criteria that isn't cut and dry. So cost of doing business is not cut and dry. As you are reading through like your reviews, for those that haven't completed them, I think it will be interesting. Claire's going to put in the language. There were a few applications that we have put into the review pool, but that do have some components of cost of doing business. But there's always, you know, additional considerations. Like some of them were, like an example is an application that a large part of their budget was tree stock, but which could be considered, like we gave the example of like seed and like fertilizers as cost of doing business investments, but it was a brand new initiative. Like they were, you know, like, so that it didn't feel like cost of doing business. Okay, so Donna, and then Allison, and then Alex, and then I think we will have to shift to administrative updates. So Donna.
Yeah, I wanted to just expand on what Bob was talking about. You know, again, I'm reading the Maple grants and they're all asking for equipment. I mean, that's basically what you do when you sugar is you buy new equipment. But I think I get where he's going is like, you know, I'm less inclined to want to fund the guy who forgot to replace his evaporator for 40 years and now he's desperate for a new one versus somebody. I have a grant that they're making candy and they're trying to introduce new equipment to make better candy that's got a longer shelf life. So it's kind of like we could fund equipment, but maybe not, like you said, the equipment that's just stuff they should have been replacing over the years versus something that they want to try out that's new and different.
Allison and then Alex.
So I'm kind of struggling with that too, because there are there's one particular equipment grant that I feel is really transformative for this business. So I'm wondering if there's a better way to tease out some of that information so that we could justify a funding decision. If somebody's buying something that's new and unusual or innovative, I mean, I guess I could understand that too, but I'm also looking at how much they're seeking to invest in it. And if somebody is just looking for a very small pot of funds to replace a piece of equipment, maybe it's less urgent actually. I mean, it might help to look at, well, what kind of typical investments have they made in the past and where does this investment fit on that scale? Just a thought.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about how, though, we have to think about how we would standardize like that analysis. So let's hear Alex, and then if anybody has more thoughts on that specifically, Alex.
Having not done this ever before and being brand new to it, forgive me if I say something a little that means I should have read something more carefully, but it seems like there's a lot of distillation of the materials in these grants, and then we, the reviewers, are presented with that information. And I haven't actually seen like the 8-page paper copy of the grant, and that to me is challenging. And then something that I think can pull together a fair bit of what Tyler and Bob were highlighting is that in that application, like the executive summary is the thing that we need as a reviewer. At least that's what I would like. And you can have the grantee put together, you know, that summary that is very helpful and hopefully the distillation that I can then review instead of having the different little pieces of things. And you could have those geographic points or other things that we've been talking about. So maybe I just don't understand that happens already and I'm missing it. But if not, that would be very helpful to me.
And you're talking about in the spreadsheet, like we send a spreadsheet to the whole board prior to the meeting, but having a more, so right now there's a project summary in that spreadsheet. And I think sometimes I've been thinking that we could offer more guidance to applicants around like what to put in that project summary. But, so like in the spreadsheet, we can include, you know, and sort of highlight like years in business, like the geographic location is there, but we can highlight it. We can bring it like further over because the spreadsheet is big. Because it's, although it actually, I don't know if folks noticed, but it's much smaller this year. Like there are a lot of, it used to be literally the responses to, it was the full application. It no longer it was not that for the Service Provider and Producer Association. But I think there's absolutely ways that we can call out, you know, the information that's really important to the board in that spreadsheet. Is that, Alex, am I understanding, or
Yeah,
can
or,
you?
or simply have a repository where I don't have time to read everybody's applications, but if there's a one-page cover thing that the grantee has put together, that's an actual just a document. I think it's the spreadsheet, the spreadsheet choppy that is really challenging because you're like, I gotta follow, you know. So if you're just like, what's the one-page summary? Can we just put these somewhere where everybody can look at them? Like I'm more of a novel reader instead of a choppy parts reader.
My understanding is that was something that used to happen, I think around when I came on board. And then at some point we stopped doing it because we weren't sure if people were reading them, because it did end up being this sort of long document once you have like a paragraph or two on all of them, which I think, so all that to say, like, I think if that feels helpful, like we can certainly do it again. I think it's just more information. It sounds like Alex feels like it would be helpful. So it would be helpful to know if other people feel like having that kind of abstract actually is helpful or not. I think we did it and then it wasn't, but we have a different board now, so.
Bob?
Yeah, I do miss those summaries.
Okay.
So, and the summaries were prior to my tenure. What was included in them, Bob?
It was just the one paragraph summary of, or even less than that, of each project.
But so you just preferred it out of the spreadsheet format?
Yes.
It was in a Word doc, yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay. Because it's basically, okay, yeah.
Because then, you know, I'm a little bit of a Luddite. I ended up printing them all out because I can't keep two screens open.
Okay. Yeah. So you would refer to those, yeah. Okay.
Without other information like total request, or like you could summarize the project, but there are other like core pieces of information that would complement that people would want to look at.
You know,
I mean, that were like a total summary versus.
Yeah, and a lot of it was the project's impact on the sector. So it was more useful when we were doing the larger projects. So you could look at all the projects in a sector and just get a kind of a gut feeling of where the most impact was.
Yeah, like maybe in thinking about how it might be organized, you could have it organized by sector, you could have the grant request, you could have the town that the
I think it had a few pieces, like it was like a tiny table or something, and then a paragraph for each. That
we can probably go back in our documents.
Yeah, I'm sure I
see
have
what it is.
many versions of them.
We'll do that. I'm going to try to keep us on time if we can. Is there anything else on this topic we should continue
I
to
probably
discuss?
have them all printed out somewhere upstairs.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I get really excited about this kind of stuff personally. I just like love.
That's okay.
Process improvement. So
it's all right.
But yeah,
we did move back calendar times on folks, so I'm sure there's some that have 10:30s. I just want to make sure we get them out on time. Thank you. That was a great discussion. I'm gonna turn over to Elizabeth Nance if she has an update from ACCD.
Good morning. Sorry, the camera's off. I am not feeling well, so you don't want to see me. I don't think I have any updates specific. I think we're with everybody else. Just going through the legislative process. So hopefully we'll have something, the next time we get together.
Not to put you on the spot, but I think we're still processing BGAP and have not done supplemental payments, correct?
I wouldn't, I had debated mentioning BGAP. We're moving slowly through the supplementals. I think, Agency of Ag still has a few 2024 applications. Just, a handful that they're getting through. And I think they've reviewed all of the supplementals. I think they had 10 or 11 supplementals. So those initial reviews have been done. So those should be going out, getting completed by the end of January, hopefully.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I
Thank
hope
you.
you feel better.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put in a little bit of fun. I don't know, perhaps some of you have seen the Agency of Ag collaborated with Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program on their growing art contest. And we were able to publish a kids calendar for 2025. And I'm gonna put in the chat the link. If you're lacking a calendar in your office, there is a printable version at the link that I just posted. Super fun. It's been great to see the children that have been involved and the excitement that it's brought to them, their families, and their schools. So the other update that I have is really around the value-added producer grant, which is now open. It's approximately 30 million in total that's available through this program through USDA. Not a small amount. I'll put that link in the chat as well. And then just starting off the legislative session, been an exciting start. Neat to see so many different faces and have new committee makeups. It's pretty exciting time. Also interesting to walk into the building and have a new lieutenant governor. We were able to meet with Lieutenant Governor Rogers last week to discuss agriculture, and I'm sure others will be getting pulled in to discuss their industry. So, yeah, we'll be spending some time up there in the building this week as well. And then a lot of testimony has started already. So week 3 is underway, and we should know the budget here soon. I think budget address comes out on the 28th, and then we'll know our working lands budget per the governor's recommend. Also on the 28th, we have a Ag Producer Association gathering that's at the State House in the cafeteria from 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. There will be appetizers, finger foods, and many of our faces in the Ag Producer arena will be there. So if you're in the building on the 28th and you wish to get a snack, come see us in the cafeteria. That'd be great. I think that's it for now. I don't see any public. Are there any other, Ellen, you had something you wish to discuss? Is this enough time, or you want to?
Yeah. I
Okay.
just wanted to, in case folks like to monitor testimony going on, the Stable Jobs Fund and our Farm to Plate program, along with Abby Willard and Trevor Lowell, have been in communication with the 2 Ag Committee chairs about providing some high-level overviews about the food system as a overall, because so many members are new to not only the committee but also the legislature, so they don't know the history of Vermont Farm to Plate, how it's the state's plan, how it connects to the Working Lands Enterprise Fund, how it connects to the agency's grant making, how it connects to the Climate Action Plan and the Governor's Commission on the Future of Ag reports. So Jake and Abby and I were in last week and did a high-level overview in just about an hour. So if anybody's just would like sort of a history lesson of Vermont Farm to Plate, you can go to last week's testimony that we gave. It's just an hour. I think we did a good job of providing that overview. But then tomorrow and Friday, we are going to be having 2 2-hour blocks a 2-hour block tomorrow in House Ag and also then again on Friday to go through more census of agriculture data, high level, again, overviews to provide some grounding in what the Census of Agriculture of 2022 was indicating about the farming sector. And then from our New England Feeding New England research and some other farm to plate stuff, sort of sprinkling in the other parts of the food system, again, to just provide a grounding for them so that as more and more organizations come in and say, this is what we do, this is who we are, this is our part of the food system, that there's more context. Friday's session is going to be looking at some of the approaches that we use for things like understanding the stage of development, the scale of operation, and the type of markets that food and farm businesses sell into, depending on their stage and scale. Looking at the business assistance continuum for farms and food related businesses. We have a graphic, I think we've shared it with the board in the past, of all, it's been updated, of all the organizations that do different types of business and technical assistance at different stages of development of a business. The capital continuum of different types of capital. So again, just sort of walking them through, getting a grounding on and more context as well as sense making around what is the food system, what are the trends, where is it going, what are the needs, what are the gaps, so that as the Working Lands Coalition presents, or as the agency presents, or others like you present, there's some additional context for the members to have in understanding what people are talking about, and especially once they start getting into drafting bills or considering bills that have been drafted, that kind of thing. So just a heads up, we'll be in the Senate Ag Committee next Friday, the 31st, doing a similar presentation, the truncated. And then there may be additional panels that we offer to the committee per their request on specific parts of the food system. Like we'd really like to bring a group of distributors in to meet with them and a group of retailers to meet with them, again, for that grounding and information review of things, so they better understand the business of being in farm and food sector.
Ellen, are these hearings, can you share links for people to log in and view?
Actually, everything is online on the web pages. So I've gotten into the habit, many of you probably also do too, Monday morning first thing, take a look at, go to the Ag Committee's web page on the legislature's website. Look, open up the agenda document for the week, see what's being offered, and then during those times you can go and live stream it if you actually want to do it right at that time that the presentation's happening, or you can go back later and by date and you can see what's been recorded. Everything's recorded, so it's all available.
I would always be happy to give a quick 101 of the legislative page if board members wish to learn that, where the agendas are, where the live streams are, those sorts of things, because everything is right at our fingertips. Donna?
Yes, please. I don't know where any of that is.
Yeah.
You want to just do a quick screen share, Allison? It'll take literally 2 minutes.
If members have time, I'm going to do it in 2 minutes. So I'm hopefully you can see my screen, correct? So this is the legislative screen right here. And as Ellen was saying, there's 2 ways you can search for a committee. You can either do it here where the search bar is on the main screen, or you can go up to committees and it shows all the committees. You choose the committee you wished. You look at the top, their agendas always published here, and their previous meetings, there's a schedule here. I'm going to click on the agenda just so you can see it. So today, it looks like they'll be meeting with VDPA at 3:15. And at that time, if you want to see the meeting at 3:15, you click on live stream and it will show immediately what is live. Right now, there's nothing live, so you can click on all of the historical meetings that they have. But when they're live, you can either click on the live stream here, or it usually shows up on the top left-hand side, and it specifically says that they're live at that moment. So it's very easy to get around the website. Also, if you know that there was an individual that was in committee that discussed a certain thing, you can go down here to witnesses and it'll show you all the witnesses that have been in. And then you can search by that witness and see what they brought. Probably EB was talking about HPAI, no consumer protection. You can also, if it was last year's session, go over to the top left, pull it down, any of the previous sessions. So when Act 64 passed, if you wanted something, you can go back in its time and pull up that session, go down to witnesses and see, who brought in what on that particular bill. So it's super handy. It goes way back in time and good historical information to have there. So that's a quick rundown of how the legislative site works. But if you just get comfortable with the main page that you go into, it will bring you everything for the committees. Your House overview, if you click on the House each day, it'll show you the House calendars. You can also go through House bills. You can go through acts, which are previous bills that have been passed that are now laws. So a wealth of information. If you want to look for something, you don't know how to find it, give me a call and I'm sure I can find the needle in the haystack.
And just before everybody signs off, a reminder that reviews are due at the end of this week. Business enhancement application reviews. That's part of the reason we shortened this meeting, so that everybody would have a little bit of extra time to get those done, hopefully with a little bit of additional ease. So thank you everyone for reviewing.
Thank you. And also, I do need a motion to properly adjourn the meeting. So if we could do so, that would be great.
So moved.
Thank you, Alex. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Yep.
Thank you, Allison. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Happy review. Thank you all. Stay healthy. Take
Thanks all.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.